All right, so here is the second part. So I have number 12. It says write an equation using the given table. So I'm using this table full of ordered pairs to find out what my slope and my y-intercept is in order to write my equation. Okay, so remember, I can use my formula, which is y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1 to figure out what my slope is by just using two of the ordered pairs from the graph, or not the graph, the table, sorry. So I have negative 2 and 6 and 1 and 0. Okay, I can label them if I want to. Okay, so I can know which one I'm plugging in. So plugging this in, I have 0 as y2 minus y1, which is 6, all over x2, which is 1, minus negative 2, which is x2. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, which is a common mistake made, is that we mistaken that negative to be just one subtraction sign, so we don't plug the subtraction sign in first and then the negative. We want to make sure that we bring down or we bring along the subtraction sign and then we plug in our negative 2, which then makes this into a positive. Okay, so 0 minus 6 is equal to negative 6. And then 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. And I can simplify this a little bit more, which is negative 6 divided by 3, which is going to give me negative 2. So that means that my slope is negative 2. Now I still have to find my y-intercept, and if I look at my x values, none of them are 0, so I can't really figure out what my y-intercept is by the table. What I have to do now is I have to use y is equal to mx plus b, and use one of my ordered pairs. I'm going to go ahead and use 1 and 0, and my slope that I found, which is negative 2. And I'm going to plug that into my formula to solve for b. So I have 0, which is y, is equal to negative 2, which is my slope, or m, times 1, which is x, in my ordered pair, plus b. Okay, now following the order of operations, I would have to multiply first, which is negative 2 times 1 plus b. And now I'm ready to get b by itself. So I'm going to move that negative 2 to the opposite side, which gives me positive 2, or adding 2 on both sides. Negative 2 plus 2, they cancel out. So I now have b by itself. And then I have 0 plus 2, and 0 plus 2 is equal to 2. Okay, so I have b is equal to 2. So with the information that we found that our slope is negative 2 and our y-intercept is positive 2, okay, I'm going to look at my options to see which one represents my slope as negative 2 and positive 2, which is D. Okay. Now, once again, we are creating an equation, once again, for our slope or our graph. Okay, so looking at our graph, we are going to have to identify slope and our y-intercept. I'm going to go ahead and start off with my y-intercept just because I have that visually a little bit easier. It's wherever the line crosses on the y-axis, and it crosses on the y-axis at 3. So my y-intercept is 3. And then looking at my slope, I can get 2 points, plug them into my formula, or I can use rise over run. I'm going to go ahead and use rise over run. So looking at this formula, I'm going to go down 3 to get to the same level as my other point, and then I'm going to run 2. So if I go down 3, remember that's a negative, and then to the right is a positive. So I have negative 3 over 2. I cannot simplify that anymore, so this is my final answer. Okay, now I have to figure out, I officially have the 2 pieces of information, so I have to match it with the corresponding answer, which means that I have a negative slope, that is 3 over 2, and a positive y-intercept, which is C. Now, when we are looking at what does linear system of equations with one solution, when we are looking at linear systems of equations, there are 3 different types of solutions that we're looking at, okay? We have a no solution. We have infinitely many solutions. And then we have our one solution, which we are looking at. Okay. Oh, that looks bad. When we are working with no solution on a graph, what you are really looking at for a no solution is two parallel lines. So we have one, I'm going to use a different color, one line, and then my second line, which is my parallel line. Okay, for infinitely many solutions, we are looking at collinear lines, which is two lines on top of each other. Okay, so it just looks like one line on the graph. And then when we look at one solution, this is where we have our two lines of equations intersecting each other. So I have one line going this way, and then I have another one possibly going that way. So where they intersect, where they cross each other, that is my one solution. So once again, if they are asking me what a one solution looks like on a coordinate plane, that is lines that intersect. Okay. Oops. Now looking at number 15, they're asking me identify the association for the given scatter plot, select all that apply. So if I am looking at my scatter plot right here, okay, if I look at the points, I have to ask myself, do I see it increasing or decreasing at any point? Okay, if I look at this specific one, I see no type of increase or decrease because my points are just kind of all over the place. Since it's all over the place, I'm going to have a no association. And it's also going to be nonlinear because I cannot get a line on the graph with the points that I have here. Okay, so those are my two associations. Looking at the next one, okay, if I start from my y-axis and kind of move towards the right, I can see that I can slowly have some type of decrease in my graph. So because I have a decrease in my graph, I have a negative association. And they're asking me if it's linear or nonlinear. Most of my points on this graph, ooh, what's happening there? Most points of my graph are making a line or some type of linear correlation. So that is why I have a linear graph here. Okay, moving on to this last scatter plot. So I am looking at this one, and once again, starting at the y-axis, if I slowly start reading it towards the right, I'm going to see that I'm having a increase in my graph, meaning I'm going to have a positive association. But we have to make sure that most of my lines is going to be in the direction of some type of line. If I look at most of my points on this graph, they're actually giving me a curve, which makes this non-linear. Okay. Going down to number 18, they want me to write an equation. So using, once again, I'm going to find what my slope and my y-intercept is equal to by looking at the line. Now, a common mistake that is made when we are looking at scatter plots is that we like to look at the points surrounding the line and not the points on the line. We're finding the slope and the y-intercept of that specific line, not of the points around it. So we want to make sure that our points that we are picking are from that specific line. So if I look at my y-intercept, remember it's where it crosses the y-axis and it crosses right at that 8. So my y-intercept is 8. And then I have to figure out what my slope is, okay? I like to look at points where it crosses those crossings, like the grid marks, to kind of use as points that I can find my slope with, okay? Now, if I use rise over run for this, I'm going to go down 1 and over 1, meaning -1 over 1, okay? So my slope, if I keep doing that as well, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, okay? That means that my slope is consistently going down -1. Okay, so looking at my equations that are written for me, if I'm replacing m for slope for -1 and my y-intercept for +8, that is going to give me a number 19. So this one I'm going to use process of elimination, okay? If I extend my line a little bit, now I'm not always going to say this is going to work, but for this specific answer, since we don't really have accurate points that we can clearly see what the point is, I am going to use a process of elimination, because if I look, all of my slopes are the same and all of my y-intercepts are the same. So if I look at the line of the slope, the direction it's increasing, okay? Because it is increasing, that means I have a positive slope. That's a negative and that's a negative, so I'm going to go ahead and cross that out. Now, looking at my y-intercept, if I were to extend that line a little bit more, that means I have a positive 100. So that leaves me with option D. I have a positive slope and a positive y-intercept. Okay. And to see one just like that one, except they actually give us our points, we once again have to find what m is equal to and what b is equal to. So using the ordered pairs given to me, I'm going to find my slope. Okay. This one's x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay. Plugging it into my slope formula, which is y2 minus y1, all over x2 minus x1 is equal to 44 minus 60 all over 3 minus 5. When I simplify it, 44 minus 60 is equal to negative 16, and 3 minus 5 is equal to negative 2. I can still simplify that, which just gives me that positive 8. So that means that my slope is positive 8, and looking at my y-intercept where it crosses the y-axis, it crosses at 20. Okay, so that means that my slope is going to be a positive 8 and my y-intercept is going to be a positive 20, which leaves me with B. Okay, remember your slope is always attached to x, so that's why D would not be an answer. All right, looking at 21. So they are asking me the two-way table below. The number shows the students in a class that use a cell phone and play Xbox. Identify which number complete the table. So I have 78 and 57. Okay, and they want me to figure out the first empty box, which identifies cell phone and no Xbox player. So that means a student that has a cell phone but does not have a cell phone. Now, if I have a total of 78 students that own a cell phone, and out of that 78, 57 own an Xbox, what I have to do in order to figure out what my answer is going to be is I have to subtract 78 minus that 57, okay, which is going to give me 21. Okay, now I have to do the same thing over here. That second box that I have empty is the total amount of how many people do not have a cell phone. So what I have to do is I have to add the total amount of people that have no cell phones, which is 13 plus 9. Okay, so that is going to be 22. All right, and our very last one, our last box is right here. Okay, in order for me to find out what my total amount of Xbox are going to be, there are two different ways. Okay, I can add the amount of people that have Xbox, which is 57 plus 13, or I can subtract the totals that I have and get whatever my answer is, which is 70. Okay. Moving on. Then I have Mr. Moriarty surveyed some students to find which students agree or disagree with virtual expectations, identify which numbers, and complete the table. So once again, take it step by step. Do not rush the process. Look at what the category means. So this specific box, the first one, means that 7th graders that agree with the survey. So if I have a total amount of 108 students, 7th graders, and 70 that disagree, I am actually going to subtract 108 minus 70, which gives me 38. Okay. And then looking at 8th graders, I am trying to figure out how many 8th graders disagree with the survey. So if I have a total of 92 students and 41 that agree, I'm going to subtract 92 minus 41, which gives me 51. And our very last one, they just want to know the total amount of everything. So I can find that out by either adding 108 plus 92 or 79 plus 121, which gives me 200. Okay. Number 23. If I look at this one, they want me to figure out the two-way table shows the number of students in Mrs. Riley's third period class that do or do not do chores and whether or not they receive an allowance. Identify which numbers complete the table. So I have chores, and they want me to figure out the total amount of people that do chores. Now I have 13 people that get an allowance that do chores and 3 that do not get an allowance and do chores. So if I add those two, I get the total amount. So 13 plus 3 is equal to 16. Okay. Looking at my second box down below, they give me no chores. So if I have a total amount of 9 people that do not do chores and 5 of them get an allowance, I'm going to subtract 9 minus 4, or 9 minus 5, which gives you that 4. And the very last one, which is my total amount of people that get an allowance. Okay, so you can find this 2 different ways, and all of these you can find different ways. You don't necessarily have to do it my specific way. So looking at this last box, it is total amount of people that get an allowance. I can either add the 13 plus 5, which is the total amount of people that get an allowance, or I can subtract my total amount of people that I have in general minus the 7 that do not get an allowance to figure out how many do get an allowance. Okay, if I add 13 plus 5 or subtract 25 minus 7, I get a total amount of 18. Okay, moving on. So I have to identify if this is a scatter, or not, this is a scatter plot, if it's cluster, outlier, both, or neither. Okay, remember, cluster means a group of points that we have of data, and an outlier means that we have a data point that is just not even close to the rest of the data. Okay, so I have a random point over here, and that means that we have an outlier. Okay, because the rest of my data seems pretty consistent. They're not grouping up too much, so the only thing that I have is an outlier. Now looking at this very last one, you can kind of flip your head if you want to, but I kind of have a group right here. They're all kind of bunched up together, so I have some type of cluster, but if I look, I also have an outlier over here, which is just a random point completely away from the rest of the data. So I actually have both for this one. Okay. Now, remember, your final's tomorrow. Please make sure to log on time so you can take your final and have enough time to finish it, okay? Email me if you have any questions, and we're almost done, guys.